My name is Sarah Calloway, and I am 39 years old. Not long ago, I sat at the respondent's table in a county courtroom, while a lawyer in a suit that probably cost more than my commercial oven pointed his finger at me and called me a kidnapper. The 3 children I had raised for 12 years were listed in his paperwork as my victims. Across the aisle, my older sister Diane cried beautifully into a tissue she never once actually used. 12 years ago, she pulled into my driveway on a Saturday morning, unbuckled her 3 children from their car seats, and asked me for 1 hour. Just one. I got 12 years of fevers, lunchboxes, science fairs, night terrors, and emergency pancakes. She got a head start on a life she had already secretly packed and planned. Now she was back with fresh highlights, a designer coat, and a petition that said I had stolen her family. But here is what none of them knew that morning in that courtroom. Inside my bag, underneath my checkbook and a crumpled grocery receipt, sat a sealed envelope, 11 years old and never once opened, with a city name written in the upper left corner in my own handwriting, Memphis. What happened when the judge finally slid it open, what he asked me, and what I said back, I will get there. I promise you it is worth staying for. Welcome to Story Sentence, where ordinary women tell the loudest stories of their lives. Stories about family, betrayal, and the people who choose to stay when everyone else drives away. If this story presses on a familiar bruise somewhere deep inside you, drop a comment below and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss what a woman like me does when she finally stops being quiet. Let me take you back 12 years to a Saturday morning in June. I was 27 years old, renting a small, worn house on Maple Ridge Drive on the east side of Clarkton, Indiana, working nights at a diner downtown, and saving every single tip I made for culinary school. I had a plan, a drawer full of applications, and a life that was just beginning to take a shape I recognized as mine. Diane's minivan pulled into my driveway at 9:15 that morning, with the muffler coughing and the passenger window cracked. My sister was 32 then, a widow of 13 months. Her husband Derek had been killed in a highway accident the previous spring when a truck crossed the median on Route 40, and grief had done something to her face that I could not name then and still cannot name now. She came up my front walk carrying Lily on her hip like a bag she had grown tired of holding. Lily was 2 years old and warm with a low fever. Cole was 4, half asleep and dragging his sneakers. Nora was 6 and already holding everyone's shoes in a careful bundle under one arm, the way she held everything, like it was her job to keep the world from losing its things. Behind all 3 of them, Diane dragged 2 black garbage bags of children's clothes and dropped them on my porch the way you drop off donations at a church drive, without ceremony and without looking back. She smelled like cigarettes and vanilla lotion, and her eyes kept sliding past me to the minivan idling at the curb. She said she had an appointment she absolutely could not miss. She said she could not bring the children to it. She did not say what kind of appointment. Then she pressed the diaper bag into my arms, smiled the particular smile that had gotten her out of everything since 1991, and said, "Just 1 hour, Sarah. I swear on Mom's life." I asked what kind of appointment happens on a Saturday morning. She was already walking backward down my porch steps. Nora stood at the edge of the driveway and waved at the minivan until it turned the corner at the end of Maple Ridge Drive. Then she turned around and asked if I had any popsicles. I did, and that was our whole afternoon. Great popsicles, cartoons on the living room floor, and a fever that broke on Lily by 4 o'clock. At 6 that evening, I called Diane. At 7, I called again. By 10, I was standing at my front window, with Lily asleep against my shoulder, watching every single set of Maple Ridge Drive, watching every single one of them keep going past my house without slowing. The porch light stayed on all night. The minivan never came back. By Sunday evening, her voicemail was full. By Monday morning, her number would not ring at all. I called the police, and a tired sergeant explained to me in a patient voice that grown adults are entirely allowed to disappear, that it is not a crime to leave your children with a family member, and that I should call back if I discovered any evidence of foul play. The only foul play I found was in Diane's apartment on the other side of town. Her landlord let me in on Tuesday because she owed him 2 months of rent, and he was quietly hoping I might pay it. The apartment was not ransacked. It was simply empty. The closets were bare, the hangers gone. The second-hand crib had already been sold to someone through an online classifieds board. The neighbor across the hall told me a moving truck had come the Thursday before. The Thursday before she drove her children to my porch, Diane had already packed out her entire life while I was pulling a double shift at the diner. She had arranged the truck, cleared the apartment, and then driven her children over to me like the last errand on a moving day checklist. My mother Margaret sat in my kitchen that week with her hands folded on the table and said the thing she would keep saying for the next 8 years, in a voice that carried the absolute certainty of someone who has never been wrong about the things that matter most to her. "She'll come back, Sarah. She is their mother." Mom said it the way you state a law of physics, like gravity, like something you would be a fool to argue up. I wanted to believe her. Derek had died only 13 months before, and grief does strange and violent things to people, and maybe my sister had simply needed air. That is what I told myself that first week, while I bought a used car seat at a neighbor's yard sale and learned how to install it by watching 4 different videos on my phone. Then one night, I was tucking Nora into the fold-out couch in the room that still had my culinary school textbook stacked along one wall, and she looked up at me with those serious brown eyes and asked, "Did we do something wrong, Sarah?" And I looked at that 6-year-old girl waiting for the answer that would explain her life, and I said, "No, baby. Somebody did something, but it was never, not even for 1 second, you." People ask how you raised 3 children overnight with no warning, no experience, and no legal standing, and the honest answer is badly at first, and then less badly, and then one day you look up from the school pickup line and realize you have somehow done it for an entire year. I pulled my culinary school application out of the desk drawer and put it somewhere I could not see it. I picked up every shift the diner would give me. I learned that Lily would only fall asleep if the dryer was running with a load of towels in it. I learned that Cole wheezed badly when he cried too hard, and that a proper nebulizer costs real money, even with a coupon from the pharmacy. I learned that lice shampoo goes on sale every August, and that shame is a luxury item that working mothers cannot afford. So I stopped buying shame. I signed us up for WIC and stood in line at the county office behind women who looked exactly as exhausted as I did. And nobody in that line once asked me where these children's mother was. My mother helped. She kept the kids on the nights I worked doubles, and she loved them with the particular fierce love of a grandmother who knows something is broken and refuses to say so out loud. But her generation had rules about trouble. You did not air family laundry. You did not say the word abandoned inside a church building. You said Diane was traveling, dealing with some things, going through a hard season. For a while, I let the children believe some version of that too, because what do you tell a 6-year-old whose mother drove away on a Saturday morning and never came back? The truth had teeth, and she was so small. The first real wall I hit was not money. It was a clipboard. Jonah's kindergarten registration, for Cole, now 5. One line near the bottom of the form, signature of parent or legal guardian. I stood in that school office holding a pen I had no legal right to use. The secretary was kind about it, in the way that people are kind when they have seen a particular kind of heartbreak before. She slid the form back to me gently and lowered her voice. "You are going to need paperwork, honey." And paperwork, it turned out, needed my sister. The clipboard was a warning. The emergency room was the verdict. 14 months into our life together, Cole caught a chest cold that turned mean at 2 a.m. His small ribs were pulling visibly with each breath, a tight, mechanical struggle that I had learned by then meant trouble. So I drove him to the emergency room at Clarkton General, and somewhere between triage and the treatment room, a nurse asked me the question that changed the entire course of my life. "Are you his mother?" "No." "Legal guardian?" "No." She was kind, and they treated him anyway, because that is what emergency rooms do for sick children, regardless of paperwork. But a hospital social worker found me sitting in the hallway at 4 a.m. with a styrofoam cup of cold coffee and a folder, and a gentle, apologetic voice. And she explained my situation in plain English that I could not mishear or misinterpret. I had no legal standing, none at all. I could not consent to surgery if it ever came to that. I could not enroll them in school, insure them, or speak for them in any official capacity. And if the wrong person made the wrong phone call to the wrong agency, the county could remove all 3 children from my home and place them in foster care, possibly in separate homes, while the system took its time sorting out exactly what I was to them. Strangers' houses, maybe separate strangers' houses. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage while the sun came up over the rooftops, and Cole slept against the passenger window with his cheek pressed to the glass, and I made the first cold and completely clear decision of my adult life. Monday morning, I hired a family law attorney in town named Patricia Hale, a compact woman with gray-streaked hair and the steady, unhurried manner of someone who has seen every version of every family disaster and is still not surprised by any of them. Patricia said the cleanest road to legal protection was formal custody through the juvenile court system, and the cleanest version of that road required Diane's signature on a consent form. Nobody had heard from my sister in 14 months, so I hired a private investigator too. His name was Frank Greer, no relation to the judge. His fee was $1,900, half due up front. He found Diane in 9 days, working at a cocktail lounge outside Memphis, Tennessee, under her maiden name, Diane Marsh. I emptied the culinary school fund I had been quietly rebuilding, arranged 2 days off from the diner by trading shifts with 3 different coworkers, and drove 800 miles south on a Tuesday. She agreed to meet me at a motel off the old highway because she said she did not want me seeing where she lived. 14 months, and my sister looked both better and worse than I expected. New acrylic nails painted a shade of coral that matched her earrings, an expensive-looking leather jacket, and eyes that had checked out of our family like it was a hotel room she had already paid for and was done with. I set the paperwork on the little table beside the window. Consent to legal custody, prepared and notarized by arrangement with a mobile notary service Patricia had coordinated. The notary was coming at 3. Diane flipped through the pages the way you flip through a menu at a restaurant you did not choose. She did not ask about Lily's fever or Cole's lungs, or whether Nora still gathered everyone's shoes. She did not ask if the children were sleeping or eating, or whether they had asked about her. She asked what was in it for her. I want to be careful here, because this is the part of the story I kept sealed for 11 years, and I am going to honor that seal just a little longer, the way I honored it in that motel room. There was a price. She wrote it down herself on motel stationery, in the rounded, looping handwriting that our mother used to praise when we were girls in school. I read what she wrote, and something inside me went very quiet, in a way that has never fully come back. I paid it. The notary arrived at 3 o'clock sharp, watched Diane sign each page, pressed the official stamp into the paper, and while I was sliding the folder carefully into my bag, Diane lit a cigarette and smiled at me through the first curl of smoke with an expression I have thought about many times since. "You always wanted to play house with my kids," she said. "Congratulations, little sister." I stopped at the door of that motel room. I turned around and I told her the truth in the level voice I use when I am most serious. The voice I learned from 3 years of working nights in a diner, where level voices are the only ones that get heard. "I am not playing anything," I said. "I am just the one who stayed." Then I drove 800 miles north through the night with the custody folder on the passenger seat and the radio off for most of Tennessee. I pulled onto Maple Ridge Drive at midnight and stood in the doorway of the children's room for a long time, just listening to the particular sound of 3 children breathing in the dark, which is a sound I had come to need the way I needed coffee in the morning. What Diane made me trade for that signature, I will tell you when I can say it out loud without my voice going strange. We are not there yet. The juvenile court in Clarkton granted me legal custody that fall in a hearing that lasted 40 minutes and felt like a full year. And then the next 10 years happened the way bread rises, slowly and then all at once. I want to be honest about one thing I am not proud of. 5 years in, when I finally had enough money saved and enough nerve gathered, I filed to terminate Diane's parental rights entirely so I could adopt all 3 children as my own. It cost me $4,200 in legal fees, and it died on the courtroom floor because Diane hired a cheap hourly lawyer just long enough to file a written objection and then vanished again before anyone could serve her properly. The case stalled on service attempts and public searches until the court dismissed it for want of prosecution. The law leaves a door cracked for mothers, even absent ones. I learned to sleep beside a cracked door. Life got genuinely good anyway, in the way that life does when you stop waiting for it to be something other than what it is. 6 years ago, I opened the Morning Light Bakery on Clarkton's east side with a small business loan, a used commercial mixer I named Gerald after my grandfather, and a menu I had been designing in my head since I was 20. I bought the house on Maple Ridge Drive 5 years ago, the same house I had rented for years, because the children had already survived enough moving, and I was done making them carry boxes. I packed something close to 4,000 lunchboxes. I sat through stomach bugs, a broken wrist from a bicycle accident, 2 school science fairs, a 3-week crisis involving middle school friendship drama, and 1 particular heartbreak in 7th grade that required emergency chocolate chip pancakes at 10 o'clock on a school night. The children called me Sarah, and sometimes T, and I never once asked for more than that, because what they gave me every single day was already more than I had planned for. And every year, always in June, always within the same 2-week window, a blank postcard appeared in my mailbox with no signature and no message. A beach somewhere in Florida, a casino strip in Nevada, a mountain range I never identified. The first one arrived when the children were small, and it frightened me enough that I called Patricia. There was nothing legal to be done about a blank rectangle of cardboard. So I stopped showing anyone, and I kept them all together with a rubber band in the junk drawer in the kitchen, and I tried very hard not to understand what they meant, which was that somebody out there knew our address. Somebody had been keeping track of us from a careful distance, 1 postcard per year, saying absolutely nothing, saying everything. Now I want to tell you about my neighbor and my unexpected witness. Gloria Sutton lived 3 houses down from me on Maple Ridge Drive and had been there since before I arrived. She was 64, retired from the school district, and she had seen everything our quiet street had to offer, including the morning Diane's minivan pulled away. Gloria had been watering her front garden, and she had watched the whole thing. She remembered it because, as she told me later, something felt wrong about the way that woman walked away from those children. She did not look back once. Gloria had never said anything to me about it directly, not in 12 years, because she was a woman who believed in minding her own business, until minding your own business became complicity. I did not know she had been quietly writing things down in a small notebook since that morning. Date, time, what she observed. She had 4 notebooks by the time I needed her. I will tell you when they mattered. 8 months before the trial, my mother, Margaret, had a stroke at her kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon with a crossword puzzle half finished and the kettle still going on the stove. She was 72. At the graveside service, Lily held my hand so tightly that the edge of my ring left a mark in my palm that I did not feel until the drive home. I kept watching the road to the cemetery during the service, kept noting each car that turned in and each one that did not. Diane did not come. The will was simple, and it surprised no one who had watched my mother's last years closely. The farmhouse on the edge of Clarkton and the proceeds of a $312,000 life insurance policy, the result of a lifetime of buying nothing she did not need, went into a trust for her 3 grandchildren, earmarked for their education and their start in life. I was named trustee. Diane's name appeared exactly once in the document, in the particular sentence that estate lawyers write when a person has been thought about carefully and deliberately decided against. But here is what nobody warns you about when you are settling an estate. The law is thorough in ways that do not always serve you. A proper estate must legally notify all potential heirs, including the disinherited ones, including the missing ones. So a statutory notice went out by certified mail to Diane's last known address, which turned out to be a mail forwarding service in Nevada, and from there it traveled God knows how many times like a flare fired over a dark ocean. For 3 months, nothing came back. I probated the estate, kept the farmhouse lawn mowed, maintained the trust accounts with the obsessive neatness of someone who knows they will be audited someday, and allowed myself to believe the flare had sunk without finding anything. Then on a Tuesday morning in March at 10 o'clock, a rental car parked in front of the Morning Light Bakery, and a woman stepped out wearing a white wool coat and oversized sunglasses, and my hands went cold against the proofing pans before my eyes had finished recognizing her face. 12 years. Not one phone call, not one birthday card, not one appearance at our mother's graveside. She pushed through the bakery door like a customer browsing, looked around at my cases and my Gerald the mixer and the chalkboard menu I updated every Monday, and said, "Hello, T," in a voice that assumed 12 years was a reasonable gap between sentences. She looked expensive and temporary at the same time, like the rental car. The white wool coat was the kind you wear when you have never once carried a toddler with a nosebleed. Under the salon polish and the French tips, she was still my sister. Same jaw, same way of tilting her head slightly when she wanted something from you. The morning rush had cleared. It was just the two of us and the ovens, and 12 years standing between us in a bakery that smelled like brown butter and cardamom. She performed it beautifully, I will give her that much. Her eyes went soft and bright on a precise schedule. She said she had been struggling with her health for years, that she had finally been getting real help, that she was in a place now, she actually said in a place, where she could be what her children needed. She said she had thought about them every single day of every year she had been away. I looked at her nails while she said it. Fresh French tips, not a chip anywhere. I thought about the junk drawer full of blank postcards and the rubber band that held them together, and then I asked her one question. Where were you when Mom was buried? She blinked. For half a second, the performance stuttered, and I could see her choosing, and then she chose not to answer. Instead, she leaned one elbow on my pastry case and lowered her voice to the register she used when she wanted to sound reasonable and arrived at the real point. She said she wanted her babies back. Her babies. Nora was 18 and had just been accepted to the state university. Lily was 14 and doing pre-algebra homework 2 blocks away in a bedroom I had painted twice. I felt the old familiar heat climb my neck, and I set it down the way I have set it down 10,000 times, because 12 years of practice is good for something. I told her the children had school, routines, a community, and a life, and that none of that was going to be renegotiated across my pastry case. If she wanted to pursue anything formally, there were proper legal channels available to her. She smiled then, and the softness in her eyes turned off like a switch being flipped. "You'll hear from someone," she said, and walked out. A week later, I did hear from someone. The someone was a process server who apologized twice while handing me the papers in front of my own bakery, and the petition came in 2 layers, like a badly constructed cake. The first layer was a custody petition for Cole and Lily, and a motion challenging the existing order for Nora, who was now technically an adult but whose records could still be subpoenaed. Her attorney was a man named Richard Kane, and his petition used words the way tabloid headlines use words, for maximum impact and minimum responsibility. It claimed I had obtained the original custody consent through fraud. It claimed her signature from that motel room in Memphis 11 years ago was a forgery. It called the past 12 years a wrongful retention, and in one particular paragraph, clearly written for the local paper to quote, it used the word kidnapping. The second layer arrived at the courthouse the same week, a formal challenge to my mother's will, claiming I had systematically poisoned a vulnerable elderly woman's mind against her firstborn daughter, and manipulated a dying woman into disinheriting her. That second filing was the one that told me the real truth about what this was, because if the will was successfully challenged and overturned, the trust would fall with it. And if my mother died legally intestate, her estate would be split equally between her 2 surviving daughters, which meant Diane would receive half a farmhouse and half of $312,000. The custody case was the violin playing in the background. The will contest was the actual transaction. 3 days after the papers arrived, a sheriff's deputy parked his cruiser in front of the Morning Light Bakery at the height of the lunch hour to ask me polite and carefully worded questions about custodial interference. He closed the complaint within the week. My custody order took him 4 minutes to verify and satisfied him completely. But half of Clarkton watched that cruiser sit in front of my shop on a Thursday afternoon. And in a town of this size, a cruiser in front of your business at noon is a sentence that writes itself. Before I tell you what Richard Kane did next, I want to ask you something. If you have ever been the person who stayed, who carried it all quietly without asking for recognition or reimbursement, who loved someone else's people as completely as if they had always been yours, please tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight. And if you are not subscribed to Story Sentence yet, please do that right now, because what comes next is the reason I decided to finally tell this story at all. I told the children of a Sunday evening over meatloaf at the kitchen table, in the words I had rehearsed against the shower tiles for 4 days straight. "Your mother is back in town," I said. "She has asked the court to review where you live. There will be a legal process, and the adults will manage it, and nothing about tomorrow changes." I kept my voice at the temperature of a recipe instruction. The children did not. Cole, 16, shoved back from the table so hard his chair left a mark on the baseboard, and said something about his mother that I am going to leave out of this story out of respect for him, and went outside to shoot baskets in the dark until the neighbor's porch light came on across the street. Lily, 14, went the other direction entirely, which was in some ways worse. She went very still, and her ears went pink, and she asked with a careful quietness, "Does she want to meet us?" Hope. That is what lived in her voice when she asked that question. Hope, with absolutely no protection around it. She was 2 years old when the minivan drove away. Her mother is a story other people told her. And Nora, 18, sat with her arms folded across her chest and watched my face the entire time I was speaking, the way a card player watches the dealer. When the younger two had gone to their rooms, she stacked the dinner plates without being asked, and stood at the sink and, without looking at me, asked the question she had clearly been holding for years. Why did she actually leave? The real reason. I gave her the answer I had been giving since she was 6 years old, the smooth and carefully sanded stone I had been offering for 12 years. She got lost, honey. Some people get lost when bad things happen. Nora set the last plate down on the counter with a deliberate gentleness, like something that might go off, and looked at me with my mother's eyes in my sister's face. "I am not 6 years old anymore, Sarah." Then she went upstairs. I stood at my kitchen sink with my hands in water that had gone cold, and understood two things simultaneously for the first time. My children were about to be publicly fought over in a county courtroom, and the story I had built to protect them had begun to rot under the floorboards while I was busy maintaining the surface. The first hearing lasted 45 minutes, and Richard Kane performed for 40 of them. He is a tall man in expensive shoes who wears his client's grief like a tailored garment, and he stood before Judge Robert Greer and described my life in the language of quiet predation. My attorney, Patricia Hale, put the custody order on the record along with the deputy's closed complaint in the first 10 minutes, and that killed the criminal framing in a single procedural motion. You cannot be charged with stealing what a court has formally awarded you. But civil court is a different animal with different rules, and Kane knew precisely where the soft ground was. The forgery claim did exactly what it was architecturally designed to do. A signature cannot speak in its own defense. It just sits on a page while a man in expensive shoes tells a courtroom it is a lie. Judge Greer ordered a forensic handwriting examination, appointed a guardian ad litem named Helen Morris to independently represent the children's interests, and because the law has a long habit of tilting toward mothers who show up weeping, even mothers who are 12 years in a court order late, granted Diane supervised visitation, 2 hours per week at the Riverside Family Services Center. 2 hours a week does not sound like much until you have had every hour for 12 years, and then it sounds precisely like a hole drilled in the hull of a boat while everyone argues about the weather. In the parking lot after the hearing, Patricia loosened her scarf and asked me the question that good attorneys ask before you have time to construct a comfortable answer. "The consent form is strong," she said, "but they are going to swear it is fraudulent. Do you have anything else from that day in Memphis? Anything at all?" I looked at a long crack running through the asphalt for several seconds. "I have something," I said. "I would very much rather not use it." Patricia studied me the way she studies exhibits before she submits them. "Whatever it is," she said, "do not lose it." I did not tell her it had spent 11 years in a fireproof box at the top of my closet, waiting in the dark for exactly this. Riverside Family Services has a supervised visitation room with an observation window, and I stood on the wrong side of that glass and watched my sister meet her children for the first time in 12 years. She was extraordinary. I say that in a flat voice with a straight face, and mean it as a technical observation rather than a compliment. She arrived prepared in a way that proved someone had done real homework. The exact brand of basketball shoes that Cole had posted about twice on his social media. A professional-grade sketchbook with the specific ink pens that Lily had been saving up her allowance to afford. A vintage concert shirt for Nora from the band whose poster hung above her bed. The kind of shirt you find at a very particular kind of market if you know where to look. Social media is a wish list if you are shameless enough to mine it. Diane cried at the precise right moments and stopped crying at the precise right moments. She knew when to reach for a child and when to hold still and let them come to her. Lily glowed like someone had struck a match inside her chest. She sat close, then closer, then showed her mother a phone full of her own drawings, and Diane leaned in over each one with delight that looked absolutely real, and maybe partly was. Cole lasted 20 minutes as a statue, and then thawed degree by degree, because 16-year-old boys are not constructed to receive the correct sneakers from a beautiful woman who calls them tall and means it. Only Nora stayed cool, polite, straight-spined, answering questions the way a careful witness answers questions, with exactly what was asked for and nothing additional. Here is the part I did not tell anyone for weeks afterward. Before Diane walked into that visitation room, I watched her in the hallway through the second window, where she could not see she had an audience. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her coat 2 separate times, the way you press a tablecloth before guests arrive. Something in my chest moved about an inch, and I genuinely hated that it did. Then the door opened, the shaking stopped, the smile appeared fully formed, and the performance began. Near the end of the session, I watched Diane bend close to Nora's ear and say something I could not hear. On the drive home, I asked gently what was said. Nora looked out the passenger window at the dancing houses. "Nothing," she said. She just said nothing. That Clarkton is a nice town. My neighbor Gloria brought me a lasagna the week after the papers were served, set it on my counter without being asked, and told me over coffee that she had been keeping notes since the morning of the minivan. 12 years of a small notebook. She had seen the garbage bags dropped on the porch. She had seen the way Diane walked down my front steps without looking back at 3 children standing on my lawn. She had noted the time. She had noted that the children were carrying nothing except the shoes Nora held under one arm. Patricia, when I told her, sat forward in her chair and asked if Gloria would be willing to testify. Gloria said she had been wondering when someone was going to ask her. Clarkton is a good town, running on simple stories, and there is no simpler story than a mother who wants her babies back after years away, because people want to believe that love eventually wins, and mothers always return. The story reached my church before I did. At the spring potluck, my Aunt Beverly, my mother's older sister, 69 years old, a covered dish in each hand and absolute certainty in her voice, positioned herself beside me at the dessert table, with half the congregation within comfortable listening distance, and did not lower her voice even slightly. "She is their mother, Sarah. Blood is blood. What kind of woman keeps 3 children from their own mother?" Forks paused halfway down the folding tables. Heads turned. I could have said 12 years. I could have said blank postcards and garbage bags, and a boy with a wheezing chest in an emergency waiting room at 4 a.m, with no one authorized to sign for him. But you cannot win an argument against blood is blood at a church potluck, and I had stopped trying to win things in rooms where the verdict was already written. So I picked up the pie server and gave my aunt the only true thing I had that fit in a single breath. "You are right, Beverly," I said. "I am not their mother. I am just the one who stayed." It did not land as a victory. It was not supposed to. It was supposed to be true. That week, the bakery felt the tide begin to shift in the way that small towns shift, not with declarations, but with absences. A wedding cake order canceled by voicemail with no explanation offered. 2 one-star reviews from accounts with no history of reviewing anything else. A pair of regulars who began taking their morning coffee across the street and kept their eyes on the sidewalk when they passed my window. I have never once fought a town. You cannot. A town believes what is easiest to carry. Then Patricia called on a Thursday night with a new voice, the voice that means the other side has done something that requires a measured response. Richard Kane had subpoenaed the trust records, every account, every transaction, every receipt going back to probate. "He is not building a custody case," Patricia said quietly. "He is doing inventory." That night, after the children's doors had clicked shut, I did something I had not done in several years. I went to my closet and I took down the gray box. It is a fireproof lockbox with a dent in one corner from the year I dropped it moving between apartments, and it has lived on the top shelf of my bedroom closet, behind the winter blankets, and above the natural reach of curious children since the year I became a legal guardian in this county. Everything that proves my family is real lives inside that box. 3 birth certificates with their official seals, the custody order with its raised court seal, 12 years of receipts, report cards, signed on the parent line and line handwriting, a hospital bracelet the diameter of a child's small wrist. And on the very bottom, lying flat like a foundation stone supporting everything else, 1 manila envelope sealed across the flap with a strip of packing tape gone amber with age, with one word written in the upper left corner in my own handwriting: Memphis. I sat on the edge of my bed and held it under the lamp for a long time. 11 years. The paper had gone soft at the edges. I knew every sentence inside that envelope without opening it, the way you know the dimensions of a room you have slept in for years. Just 1 hour, Sarah. That is what she had said on my porch on a June morning 12 years ago, and I had been living inside that hour ever since. And the exit, it turned out, had been sitting in this envelope on the bottom of a gray box the whole time. Here is the arithmetic that had kept it sealed for 11 years. Opening it in a courtroom does not only show a judge who Diane is, it shows the children, permanently and without the possibility of revision, who their mother decided to be. There are no second drafts on a thing like that. You cannot unread your own mother's handwriting. I put the envelope back on the bottom of the box, stacked 12 years of documentation on top of it, turned the key, and returned it to the shelf behind the blankets. Then I checked the hallway out of old habit and stopped. Under Nora's door at 1 in the morning glowed the blue light of a phone screen. 2 Saturdays later, I found out whose number was on the other end. I was delivering a sheet cake to a retirement party across town when I saw them through the front window of Patton's Diner on Cedar Street. My daughter in the corner booth, across from a woman in sunglasses she did not need indoors, with no caseworker, no supervisor, no one from Riverside Family Services anywhere in the building. My sister, conducting an unsupervised visit in a public diner in violation of a court order that was barely 6 weeks old. On the formica table between them sat a small wrapped box with a satin ribbon being slowly eased back and forth under Diane's manicured finger, like a chess piece being considered. I did not slam through the door. I would like some acknowledgement of that someday. I walked in, said good afternoon to both of them in the voice I use for difficult customers, told Nora the cake delivery needed a second pair of hands, and held the door. Diane did not argue. She sat back with a particular small smile and watched me collect my own child, the way someone watches a move they anticipated. That smile followed me out to the van. On the way home, Nora held the wrapped box on her lap and stared at the road ahead, 17 and furious and frightened and working out something complicated in real time. Then she pulled the pin. She told me that Diane had said things, that Diane had said Sarah paid me 12 years ago to disappear, that Sarah gave me money to stay away so she could keep you for herself because she wanted a family and couldn't have one, that Diane had said the whole childhood was something I had purchased out of loneliness. I kept my eyes on the road and felt the architecture of it, the particular elegance of what my sister had done. She had taken my worst day, the day I sat across a motel table and watched her write a price on a piece of stationery, and she had filed the serial numbers off it and handed it to my daughter as evidence. One true bolt in the center of a lie built to bear a load it was never meant to support. Yes, money had moved between me and my sister once in our lives. Everything surrounding that fact in Diane's version had been rewired to mean its opposite. Nora watched the side of my face from the passenger seat and then asked quietly, "Is it true?" A yes would poison her understanding of her own life, and no would be a lie, and she had been reading my face and she was 6 years old, and she would smell it before I finished the word. So I reached for the middle, the way I had always reached, and the middle finally failed me in the front seat of my van on a Tuesday afternoon on Route 12. "It is more complicated than that," I said. Nora nodded the way you nod at a stranger whose name you have already forgotten, and turned back to the window. "That is not a no," she said. We drove the rest of the way with the radio off and the box unopened between us. Something shifted in the house after that Tuesday. Nothing that announced itself, just a door that used to stay open, now staying closed. A girl who used to talk freely, now choosing every word with the care of someone working in a language that is not quite her own. Silence accumulates interest. I sat in Patricia's office Monday morning and told her about Patton's Diner. She straightened in her chair like a dog who has caught a scent. An unsupervised meeting with a gift, arranged behind the court's back. "That is a violation," she said. "That is leverage. We report it today, and it marks Diane in front of Judge Greer in a way that does not wash off." Then she saw my face and waited. Reporting it meant an affidavit. It meant Nora summoned into a hallway outside a courtroom and made to testify against her own mother, turned from a person into Exhibit C. That is precisely how Diane uses children. It has never been my way. I had no intention of learning it now, just because it would work. I told Patricia no. She rubbed the bridge of her nose and told me I was making her job difficult and her respect for me inconvenient. Fine, she said. Then we need something else, and you keep telling me there is something else. So I gave her Gloria. Gloria Sutton testified at a preliminary evidentiary hearing the following week and delivered 4 notebooks worth of observations in the particular voice of a retired school administrator who has never once been called unreliable. Date, time, observation. She described the minivan. She described the garbage bags. She described the way Diane walked down the front steps of my house without turning around and drove away without checking her mirrors. Judge Greer listened to all of it and made a note and told Patricia he was looking forward to hearing more at trial. It was not a win, but it was a wall where there had not been one before. I go to the cemetery on the first Sunday of every month. My mother's stone and then Derek's, because someone should, and the children come at holidays and their birthdays. It was raining, thin and cold, and I was walking the gravel path with carnations when I saw a figure already standing at Derek's grave, and I stopped under the oak to carve before she could hear my feet on the gravel. Diane. No audience, no coat that photographed well, no one from her legal team, a gas station umbrella and flat shoes, kneeling on the wet grass in front of her husband's name and crying the way I had not seen her cry since we were girls together, the ugly kind of crying, the kind that does not photograph, the kind that has no audience in mind. She was talking to the headstone, and I only caught fragments over the sound of the rain on the leaves above me, that she was sorry, that she could not breathe in that house after the accident, with 3 children and his work boots still sitting by the door exactly where he had left them, that she had gotten on the highway and just kept driving because stopping felt like drowning, and then one complete sentence, clear as a struck bell over the rain, that I have turned over in the dark of my bedroom every night since I heard it. She said after the first year, there was no version of me coming back that was not a monster, so I stayed gone. I stood under that oak tree with the carnations going heavy in my fist, and for 1 full minute I saw the entire 12 years from the inside of my sister's life, 32 years old, widowed, 3 children under 7. Raised her whole life to be the one someone else rescued, and the person who was supposed to rescue her was in the ground under a granite stone, and nobody was coming. I almost stepped out from under that tree. I almost said her name the old way, without armor in it. Then Diane stood up, brushed the mud from the knees of her pants, looked down at Derek's name, and her voice shifted register like someone walking out of one room into another. That house should have been half mine, she told her dead husband. Mom owed me that much. She fixed her collar, opened the umbrella, and walked back to the rental car through the rain. I stayed under the oak until the taillights were gone, set the carnations down on the wet grass, and stopped feeling like a monster for what I was preparing to do. Depositions happen in conference rooms with bad institutional coffee and better acoustics than anyone expects, and Richard Kane ran mine like a man carving a Sunday roast. Small, precise cuts, no hurry. When did I first take physical possession of the children? Possession, as if they were furniture I had acquired. Had I ever restricted their access to their biological mother? Had I derived any personal financial benefit from my position as trustee? Had I influenced my mother's estate planning decisions during the period of her illness? 2 hours of small cuts, and then, without any change in his tone, the blade went somewhere unexpected. Miss Calloway, he said pleasantly, did you ever pay my client money? The conference room went still. Patricia's pen stopped. Here is what people do not understand about being under oath. The truth does not first check whether it will be used fairly. It just is. Yes, I said. Kame let it sit in the air between us for several long seconds. $15,000, he said, wired to a bank account in Tennessee. No further questions today, Miss Calloway. I watched the story assemble itself in that room in real time. The story he would present to a jury of people from this county, people who went to my church, people who bought bread from my bakery. A lonely woman aging out of her own crossabilities, She found her widowed, grieving sister at her absolute lowest moment and offered money in exchange for children. She arranged the disappearance and then performed martyrdom for 12 years on the foundation of it. It was elegant in the way that certain damaging things are elegant. Every fact in it was mine. Every fact was real, and every joint connecting them had been rewired to carry the opposite load. In the parking lot afterward, Patricia was quiet for longer than she usually allows herself to be quiet. Then she asked the question she had been circling for weeks. This thing you have and do not want to use, does it answer what he built in there? I looked at her over the roof of my car in the gray March light. It answers everything, I said. That is exactly why the children cannot see it. Patricia held my eyes for a moment. Thea, after today, the question is no longer whether they hear it. The question is whose voice they hear it in first. Patricia laid it out for me the next morning on a legal pad, with the particular precision of someone who respects you enough not to soften the math. Option 1. Produce the envelope. It directly rebuts the forgery claim. It entirely reframes the money, and it almost certainly ends both cases, the custody petition and a will contest, in a single stroke. It also becomes a public court exhibit, discoverable, quotable, and permanently accessible, where 3 people with library cards and a basic internet connection will one day be able to read every line of it, including the line that their mother wrote about what she thought they were worth. Option 2. Keep it sealed. Fight on 12 years of character and documentation. 4,000 lunchboxes against a mother's tears in front of a judge who has been trained by law and professional habit and probably his own personal history to give mothers the benefit of every available doubt. She did not tell me which one to choose. Good attorneys never do. They just make certain you cannot later pretend you did not know the full price of each option before you chose. That same week, Helen Morris arrived to conduct her guardian ad litem interviews. A calm and precise woman with sensible shoes, a canvas tote bag, and the unhurried manner of someone who has learned that the truth in a family matter almost always lives in the small observable details, rather than in anything anyone says directly. She toured the house. She saw the growth chart penciled inside the pantry door frame, the shelf of accumulated science fair ribbons, the corner of the kitchen counter where the children had apparently always done homework based on the wear pattern of the surface. She spoke with each child alone in the living room, with the door cracked open per the court's protocol, while I stood in the kitchen and concentrated very hard on not listening, which made my ears ring. Cole came out in 10 minutes with his hands in his pockets. Nora took 25 and came out with her jaw set in a way I recognized from her grandmother's face. Lily took 35 minutes and came out carrying her sketchbook against her chest and found me at the sink. She stood in the kitchen for a moment, balancing on the edge of a question she had been carrying for a long time. Then she asked it, "Did our mom ever try to come back, even once? Even once?" 12 years of the smoothest, most carefully sanded answer I had ever built stood in my throat. She got lost, honey, and refused to come out, because Nora was standing in the doorway, watching my face, and one more smooth stone would cost me both of them. The mail saved me. I am not proud of that. Certified letter from Richard Kane's office, titled Confidential Settlement Proposal, and it was the most honest document my sister had ever sent, because it contained numbers instead of feelings. Here is what Diane offered. She would withdraw the custody petition entirely. She would drop the will contest completely. She would sign a full and permanent surrender of her parental rights and consent to adoption, notarized, ironclad, the exact document I had chased for a decade and watched die in a courtroom for want of service. In exchange, she wanted $100,000 from me, personally, not from the trust. Patricia flagged that boundary immediately. And she wanted my resignation as trustee of the children's inheritance in favor of a neutral corporate fiduciary. Patricia read it twice and said in her flattest possible voice that it was the most cost-effective exit anyone was likely to offer me. She was not wrong. $100,000 was the Morning Light Bakery's full line of credit, plus the majority of my home equity, plus every dollar I had saved in the past 5 years. Painful. Possible. And then done. No trial, No exhibit list, no 14-year-old girl reading her mother's handwriting in a court file. Lily would keep her soft-focused mother who got lost in there and never found her way back. Nora would never have to sit in a courtroom and watch me prove what I paid and why. The envelope could remain sealed in the gray box until I was gone, and all it required was for me to do the precise thing I had done 11 years ago in a motel room in Memphis, at 5 times the original price. Pay her, seal it, call the silence protection, and wait to see how long the silence lasted before the next certified letter arrived. $100,000 for my family to remain mine. I am going to ask you directly. Would you have paid it? Comment yes or no below right now, and subscribe to Story Sentence before you decide, because what I chose instead changed all 4 of us permanently. I told Patricia I needed 1 night. She said take 2. I only needed the 1. I sat at my kitchen table after midnight with the checkbook open and the lamp making a small island of the whole decision. I had already done the arithmetic on a napkin from the bakery. I could cover it, barely, ugly, with the credit line and a second mortgage and 5 years of financial recovery ahead of me. And my hand knew how to write those numbers. My hand had done it before. I sat there long enough that the furnace cycled twice. Around midnight, the stairs creaked and Nora came down in her old robe. And instead of going to the refrigerator, she pulled out the chair across the table from me and sat down, which she had not done in weeks. She looked at the open checkbook and at the settlement letter beside it, which I had not moved fast enough to put away, and my daughter read the entire battlefield in approximately 4 seconds, because she has always been mine, even where it costs her. That is what she actually came for, Nora said. Not us, not really. I did not insult her by answering a question that was not a question. Then Nora leaned forward with her elbows on the table and took the whole thing apart in one breath. If you pay her again, she will come back again. You understand that, right? The word again sat between us at the kitchen table at midnight, with its shoes off, completely at home, having apparently lived in our house for some time without my official acknowledgement. I understood then that she had known since the diner, maybe longer, and that she had been sitting with it, waiting to see what I would do with the truth when it was finally in the open between us. Then Nora said the other thing. The one that ended 11 years of careful policy at my kitchen table in Clarkton, Indiana, at 12:17 in the morning. She said, "Stop protecting me from my own life, Sarah." She said it quietly. She was 18 years old, and she was right. She got up, squeezed my shoulder the way I squeeze hers when she is sick, and went back to bed. I sat with the lamp and the open checkbook for a while longer, to be certain I was certain. Then I closed the checkbook. At 9 the next morning, I put the gray box on Patricia's desk, still cold from my trunk. I told her there would be no settlement. I heard my own voice say it the way I state oven temperatures. Flat, precise, not available for negotiation. I bought her silence once, I said. It expired. I am done renting my family back to myself 1 decade at a time. Then I turned the key, lifted out the manila envelope with Memphis written in the corner, and told my attorney out loud and in order everything that was inside it, for the first time in 11 years. Patricia did not immediately reach for it. Lawyers develop a particular reverence for certain pieces of paper. She sat with it on the desk between us for a moment before she spoke. Then she walked me through the consequences at the pace of someone reading a sentence that matters. Once it enters the exhibit list, Kane sees it. Once it is admitted into evidence, it is a public record. Protective orders for documents like this are filed more often than they succeed. Journalists can pull it. Neighbors can pull it. And one day, 5 years from now, or 10, the children can pull it. Or a helpful stranger with a search engine will pull it for them. Once it is in, Thea, they will read it someday. All 3 of them. I had done my grieving for that at the kitchen table already. Then they hear it from me first, I said, before any courtroom does. We declined the settlement in writing before noon. Kane's reply came by email at 4:09 and was brief even by his standards. See you at trial. I read it twice, standing in my empty bakery with the chairs still up on the tables, and I felt the sound of a door swinging shut behind me with the clean, final sound of a decision that cannot be unmade. For 11 years, I had guarded a piece of paper. Starting now, I was simply early. Helen Morris filed her guardian ad litem report 8 days before trial, and Patricia read me the significant passages over the phone. The children are profoundly and genuinely bonded to their aunt, whose home is the only stable environment 2 of the 3 have ever known. Removal would cause substantial and lasting harm. It is this guardian's recommendation that the existing custody arrangement continue without modification. I was breathing again by the 3rd sentence. Then Patricia paused and read me the other line, the one aimed at me with the precision of a level placed on a crooked shelf. The guardian notes with concern the custodian's persistent pattern of shielding the children from information about their mother's departure, to a degree that has not served the children's capacity to understand their own history. Noted with concern. A woman with a canvas tote and sensible shoes had spent one afternoon in my house and placed her finger gently and exactly on the load-bearing beam I had built the entire structure on. I did not argue with it. You do not argue with a level. It simply tells you what is true. 2 nights before trial at dinner, Nora announced she was coming to the courthouse. I said absolutely not. She pointed out accurately that she was 18, that it was a public courtroom, that she had already arranged a study day from her university orientation schedule, and that Mrs. Watkins from the end of the block had offered to stay with Cole and Lily. Nobody, she said, could make her not go. I looked at this girl, who had been taller than me since she was 15, who I had raised on my cooking and my rules and my careful silences, and I understood that the last thing I had left to protect her from was watching me stop protecting her. "All right," I said. She let me iron her good blouse anyway. 2 nights before trial, I also sat down with all 3 of them at the kitchen table, and I told them things. Not everything, but enough. I told them about the clipboard at the school office that I had no legal right to sign. I told them about the emergency room and the social worker in the hallway at 4 in the morning. I told them about the private investigator and the 800-mile drive to Memphis and the motel table. I told them about the price Diane wrote on a piece of stationery in her own handwriting. I told them why I had never said so, because I was afraid they would do the arithmetic that a lie does in a child's head and conclude they were a transaction, that love with a paper trail behind it is not love at all. Lily made a sound I will carry for the rest of my life. Cole stared at the wall with his jaw working and held his sister. Nora read the motel stationery that I had finally allowed to leave the envelope and set it down and looked at me for a long time. "You let me spend 12 years wondering if I did something wrong," she said. Quiet, not a shout. The shout would have been easier. I did not defend myself because she was right, and because I finally understood the flaw in the structure I had built. I had not only been protecting them, I had been protecting myself, the version of me that never had to watch their faces do what their faces were doing at that kitchen table. I treated the truth like it was mine to carry, I told them. It was yours. I am sorry it took a courtroom to make me brave enough to give it back. Then I slid the copies across the table to Nora, all of them, every document, and I put the choosing where it should have lived all along. "You decide when and how Cole and Lily read the rest," I said. "Not me, not a judge, not her. You." The county courtroom smells like old oak and radiator heat, and the ceiling fan clicks on every 3rd rotation in a rhythm that has probably been the same since before anyone in this story was born. Judge Robert Greer presided from the bench with the steady, unhurried authority of a man who has presided over 22 years of other people's worst days and has learned to take his time. The gallery held a scatter of townspeople who had decided their Tuesday morning errands could wait, and in the 2nd row, in her ironed blouse, sat my daughter with her hands folded in her lap and her spine straight, watching everything the way she watches everything. Diane took the stand in a soft gray dress and performed for 45 minutes with the concentration of someone who has been preparing for this particular role for months. She had been ill. She touched the base of her throat when she said it. She had worked very hard to find her way back. She had tried so many times to make contact and been denied at every approach. And then, with her chin trembling at precisely the right frequency, she found me at the respondents' table and told Judge Greer the story I had been watching assemble itself for months. Her younger sister had always wanted what she had. Her younger sister had come to her in Memphis at her most broken, waving money, hungry for a family of her own. She paid me to stay away, Your Honor. When I tried to come back, she threatened to expose things I am not proud of. That signature they keep presenting to this court is not mine. I did not sign that document. I would never have signed that document. She wept then with careful timing, the tissue hovering near her face without quite touching it. I watched the gallery lean toward her in the way that people lean toward a window when the sun comes through, and I understood with the clarity of someone who has spent 12 years paying attention that she might actually win.
Richard Kane turned to Judge Greer with the contained satisfaction of a man who can see the finish line, delivered his summary with the confidence of someone resting a case that is already decided, and then he looked at Patricia, and the words came out of him with the easy certainty of a door being opened. Your witness. Patricia walked me through the documented inventory first. The original custody order, 12 years of school enrollment records, medical authorizations, report cards with my signature on the parent line year after year, 4,000 lunchboxes reduced to their administrative paper trail. Then Kane took his turn, and he came at me with the pleasantness of a man who has already won. He built each question one careful brick higher, and then he placed the final one with the flourish of a man certain of his architecture. Isn't it true, Miss Calloway, that you effectively purchased 3 children for $15,000? The ceiling fan clicked.
Somewhere in the gallery, a purse zipper stopped. I looked at Nora in the second row, my daughter in her ironed blouse, who had told me at a midnight kitchen table to stop protecting her from her own life. Then I looked at Judge Robert Greer, and I heard my own voice come out at the temperature I use when the ovens are burning, and panic is not available as an option. No, sir, I said, and I would like to enter something into evidence. Kane objected immediately. Patricia was already at the bench with the exhibit list, where Respondent's Exhibit 14 had lived for weeks, disclosed, described, fought over in 2 pretrial motions that Kane had lost. The original, sealed by agreement until offered through the testimony of the witness who created it. Judge Greer waved the lawyers through their procedural weather and looked at me. It is an envelope, Your Honor, I said. It is 11 years old.
I sealed it myself in a motel outside Memphis, Tennessee, on the same afternoon my sister signed that consent agreement, and I have kept it sealed ever since because of what it would cost 3 children to read it, what it would tell them about the price their mother placed on her own signature on a piece of motel stationery. The bailiff carried it from my hands to the bench, and the courtroom watched it travel the way people watch something that is about to change the weather. I found Diane's face while it moved. She had gone the color of unproofed dough. For 11 years, she had built everything on my silence. She was watching the foundation come up. She asked me for 1 hour, I said to the judge. I gave her children 12 years. The rest of that story is now in your hands.
Judge Robert Greer is a heavy-set man with reading glasses on a chain, and he opened the envelope with the court's letter opener at the deliberate pace of a man who understands that some documents require the full weight of a careful reading. 3 things came out onto the bench. The first was the original notarized consent agreement, not a copy, the original, with the notary's raised seal pressed into the paper and Diane's signature in blue ink, watched and stamped by a mobile notary service while I sat across a small motel table and held my breath. The twin of the document Richard Kane had spent months calling a fabrication. The second item was a wire transfer receipt dated the same week, $15,000, drawn from a savings account whose label appeared in my own handwriting at the top of the statement, Culinary School.
The third item was a single sheet of motel stationery from the Riverside Inn off the old Memphis highway, and I watched Judge Greer read it, and I knew every word he was reading because I had read it 10,000 times before I sealed the flap. You want papers? 15,000. I will sign whatever you put in front of me. Do not come looking for me again. Tell them I am dead if that is easier. D. The courtroom was silent in the way that courtrooms are sometimes silent, when a document speaks more clearly than any witness has been able to. Judge Greer read it twice. I watched his eyes return to the top of the page and travel down again more slowly, as if the words might arrange themselves differently the second time. Then he removed his reading glasses, folded them, and looked at Diane for a long moment, during which she found the exit sign above the rear doors of the courtroom considerably interesting.
Then he looked at me, and Judge Robert Greer, 22 years on the bench in this county, asked one question into the quietest room in Indiana. Miss Calloway, do they know? The ceiling fan clicked once. In the second row, my daughter leaned forward half an inch. "Not yet," I said. He held my eyes for a moment longer than was strictly necessary, and something passed between us that I think had more to do with being human than with being legal. Then he adjourned for the lunch hour, ordered the exhibit into the permanent record, and said quietly, almost as a private aside, that the afternoon session would wait until the family had had whatever time it needed. There is a small conference room off the main hallway of the Clarkton County Courthouse, with a table that rocks slightly on uneven legs, and a window that has been painted shut for years, and a water stain on the ceiling in the approximate shape of Indiana. Mrs. Watkins brought Cole and Lily from the house when I called, and Nora was already there. I sat the three of them down at the wobbly table, and I put copies of everything face down under my hand. And then I paid the debt I had been carrying for 11 years. I told them about the clipboard at the kindergarten office that I had no legal right to sign. I told them about Cole at 2 a.m. with his ribs pulling, and the social worker in the hospital hallway at 4 a.m. with her gentle explaining voice. I told them about the private investigator who found their mother in 9 days, working under a different name in Memphis, and about the 800-mile drive, and about the table in the motel room and the papers on it, and the notary coming at 3. I told them about the price written on stationery in their mother's handwriting, and that I had paid it without hesitation. I told them why I had never once said so in 12 years.
Because I was terrified of the arithmetic that a lie does inside a child's head, that they would calculate their own value from the wrong number and decide they had been purchased rather than loved, that a receipt behind a thing means the thing is lesser. I told them that I had been wrong to make that calculation for them, that it was their truth and I had been keeping it from them in my own name and calling the keeping protection. Then I turned the copies over, and I let them read the motel stationery, because they were going to read it in a court transcript someday, one way or another, and I was done being the last one to give them the things that were already theirs. Lily made a sound I will carry for the rest of my life, and folded into Cole's side, and Cole held her, and stared at the water stain on the ceiling with his jaw working. And Nora read it standing up, set it down carefully, and looked at me. "You let me spend 12 years wondering what I did wrong," she said.
It was not a shout. It was worse than a shout. I did not defend myself because she was not wrong, and because I finally saw clearly the beam I had built the whole house on. I had not only been protecting them, I had been protecting myself, the version of me that never had to watch their faces do what their faces were doing in that conference room. I treated the truth like it was mine to carry, I told them. It was always yours. I am sorry. It took a judge and an 11-year-old envelope to make me brave enough to stop. Then I slid all the copies across the wobbly table to Nora. Not a copy for each of them. All of them to her. You decide, I said, when and how Cole and Lily read what else is in that record. Not me. Not a judge. Not her. You. Lily wiped her face on her sleeve and asked the only question left in the world at that table in that room. She asked, "Did you ever want to give us back?" And I said, "Not for 1 single hour." The afternoon session lasted 38 minutes, and Diane's case collapsed quietly, the way paper-built things collapse, without drama and without the satisfaction of a visible breaking point. With the original consent agreement in evidence bearing the notary's seal, and the forensic handwriting examiner ready to testify, and Gloria Sutton's 4 notebooks already in the record, and the motel stationery entered as Exhibit 14, the forgery claim was no longer merely weak. It was perjury with documented witnesses and a paper trail. Richard Kane saw it. Attorneys can sense their own exposure before anyone says the word aloud. After a conference at the far end of the hallway with his client that lasted 11 minutes, he withdrew the forgery allegation from the record. He conceded that the signature was Diane's, which meant conceding the note, which meant conceding the price and the arrangement and the 11 years of deliberate silence that followed. Judge Greer denied the custody petition from the bench. He made a formal finding of abandonment on the record. 12 years, he said, without one telephone call, $1 sent for a child's need, or one appearance at a parent-teacher conference or a birthday, is not illness or circumstance or estrangement. It is a decision, renewed daily for 12 years. He said the word decision with a weight that needed no additional emphasis. The will contest evaporated with it. You cannot successfully argue that a mother poisoned her elderly parent's mind against you, while your own handwriting sits in the court record, explaining precisely how you evaluated your relationship with your children and what you believed they were worth to your departure. Judge Greer looked at Diane for a long moment before he closed the proceeding and told her that the court had rarely seen a parent more thoroughly served by their child's guardian than she had been by the terms of her own arrangement.
In the hallway outside the courtroom, Diane came past us, with Richard Kane 3 careful steps behind her. She slowed when she reached Nora. My daughter stood with her grandmother's posture and her own particular brand of stillness that she has had since she was 6 years old, and she looked at her mother the way you look at a weather system moving off toward the horizon. Diane's mouth opened. Whatever was in it, she chose not to release. She turned to me instead, and for 2 full seconds the performance was gone, and it was simply my sister, 43 years old, holding her bag in both hands, looking more tired than I had seen her look since Derek was alive. "You were always better at keeping things than me," she said, "even them." Then she walked out through the courthouse's double doors into the June afternoon light, and the 3 children watched her go, and not one of them moved a single step toward her. The ceiling fan in the courtroom could probably be heard all the way to the doors.
6 weeks after the verdict, with the abandonment finding formally on record, and Helen Morris's blessing filed in the case documents, Patricia submitted the termination of parental rights petition and initiated adoption proceedings for Cole and Lily. Nobody appeared in opposition. Nobody filed a response. The certified notices came back from the forwarding address in Nevada signed by a mail center employee who did not know any of us. The court terminated Diane's parental rights on a Thursday morning, in a hearing I attended alone because I wanted the children at school for it, in their desks, in their routines, in the ordinary Tuesday morning of their ordinary lives. Nora turned 19 the following October. On a Sunday evening 3 weeks after her birthday, she sat down at my kitchen table after dinner and slid a folded printout across to me without preamble. I opened it. Adult adoption.
She had researched it herself, the way she researches everything, with 17 browser tabs and a printed summary with her own handwritten notes in the margin. "File one for me too," she said, "and while you are at it, change my last name." Then she looked at her hands for a moment, because she has always needed a second to find the exact words for the things that matter most. "You are not just the one who stayed, Sarah," she said. "You are my mom. The paperwork is just late." The paperwork was 12 years late, and I signed it with a hand that was nowhere close to steady, and nobody at that kitchen table held it against me for even a moment. The gray box sits on my kitchen counter now, unlocked and mostly empty. The originals belong to the court file in Clarkton County. The copies belong to Nora, who keeps them in a place her siblings cannot find by accident, and consults with Lily's therapist, not me, about when and how the full record might be read when the time is right.
That is entirely her call to make. We do not keep each other's truths in this house anymore. We simply keep each other. In June, a letter arrived addressed to all 3 children in the looping handwriting we all recognized, postmarked from Nevada. I did not open it. I did not screen it. I did not hold it up to the light. I set it on the kitchen table with the electric bill and the grocery store flyer, told the 3 of them what it was, and left the room. Through the closed door, I heard them decide together, voices low, 3 people who know their own history now, making their own call about it. They put it in the junk drawer with the rubber-banded stack of blank postcards and the still-wrapped box from Patton's Diner that has sat untouched since the Tuesday I drove past the window and saw them inside. Maybe someday. Entirely their call. She asked me for 1 hour 12 years ago on a porch I still sweep every morning before the bakery opens. Her hour is finally up.
And the children know everything now. Every document, every number, every line of Motel stationery. And they are still here, still at the table, still in the rooms I painted, still mine in every way that has ever actually mattered. If you take one thing from this story, let it be this. Blood can tell you where you came from, but it cannot tell you where you belong. The people who belong to you are the ones who show up at 2 a.m. with a nebulizer and do not ask to be thanked for it. The ones who tell you the truth, even when the truth costs them the version of themselves they have worked hardest to protect.
The ones who are still standing in the kitchen when every set of headlights has kept on going down the street without stopping. That is my story. One gray box, one sealed envelope, one question from a judge who had seen 22 years of families break and mend in his courtroom. Do they know? And the longest hour my family ever lived.
If you have ever been the one who stayed, the one who carried it quietly for years without asking whether anyone noticed, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you are tonight and what you carried. And if this story found you at the right moment, please subscribe to Story Sentence right now so you do not miss the next one. There are more quiet women out here, and we are done being quiet.